While you cue that up, I can start with your introduction. So
Cool.
we're looking at exploring OCLC's entity platform, a linked data tool for visualizing provenance. He's a technical services librarian at Mannix Library and University of Divinity, specialist in rare book cataloging with backgrounds in computer science, art history, cultural material conservation, currently exploring methods for enhancing Mannix Library's special collections using various linked data options, including OCLC's Meridian service. Amy isn't able to be here today, but we are going to be seeing something from her, I believe. Dr. Amy Isham majored in English at the University of Tasmania with a special interest in British literature and philosophy. Amy has a Master of Applied Science from Charles Stewart and a PhD in Regional Development from Federation University. Amy is the library manager at Mannix Library, writes academically in religious studies and social sciences, and is an associate at the Center for Public Christianity. I'll hand it over to you now.
Okie dokie. Hopefully everyone can see my screen.
Looks good.
Okay, just a short intro. We've been working with OCLC's Meridian service since late last year, early this year. And it's been a journey. We initially just got it as a bit of professional development. What can we do with linked data? It's the future. And it kind of exploded from there because we got really interested in it and ran some projects. And I made a way of visualizing the data that we got out of Meridian that connected everything contextually to our special collections. So our little presentation today is going to really take a theme, the theme of Gothic literature, and try and explore its context within our collection and how we view the entities from Meridian. So I'll play Amy's part of the presentation, and she can take you through an introduction to that, and I'll go from there and explain further. Okay.
Hi, I'm Amy Isham. Welcome to Exploring OCLC's Entities platform. I'm Amy, as I said, and I'll be working with Mr. Hugh Sandover later, who will give us a bigger picture on the technical side of this, but I'm just here to give you the fun literary side of things. So we've been working with OCLC's Meridian since November last year. We've tried a few different projects, but one of the things we found was that it was difficult to get enough data, and we ended up rekeying in. So when we picked this project, we decided to work with Gothic literature, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But we're starting with Strawberry Hill. Strawberry Hill was important for this project. It was kind of the central point, and you'll see why later. Because Meridian is kind of a thing that works with making connections between other works, other entities, and entities could include people or organizations or places. We found that we struggled to make the connection sometimes. I'd create a project and go, oh, I'm going to connect this to this, and it was hard to find enough data. So in this case, we started with Strawberry Hill House, which you can see, I'll just move me, in that top right, that's Strawberry Hill House. That was a temple of kitschy Gothic that Horace Walpole created as just a celebration of the Gothic aesthetic that he was really, really into. And it inspired him writing the first Gothic novel, which is The Castle of Otranto. And later on, it had a subtitle, A Gothic Story. And you can see in the top left there a beautiful cover from our own collection, our own rare books collection of The Grave, which was written by Robert Blair in 1743. And I think this was the edition that we have is a bit later because it has some beautiful engravings. So we digitized those for you. In the middle, you can see the title page of Castle of Otranto. And in the bottom left, you can see the picture gallery in the Strawberry Hill House, which is actually really beautiful. It's red and gold and it's dramatic. And all the rooms are much, much smaller than you would expect. So the reason why we picked Gothic literature, though, is not just because it's cool and we like it, but because the connection with our rare books. And you can see this book here was one that was actually you could see Horace Walpole's name on the subscription page. He was a patron of this book, which is called Antiquities of Great Britain. And this beautiful book really celebrated an aesthetic that was popular at the time called the sublime, which was what you would describe as something that gave you a sense of awe and terror in the unspoiled or ruins, the ruined landscapes. And there was a lot of ecstatic poetry that was what they described as elegiac or elegies about death, or the grave is kind of one of the first known as one of the first Gothic poems. So we're coming into a time where history and science and philosophy and aesthetics and art are really changing, and they're very fascinating to us. But we also found that the great thing about Gothic literature is that there are a lot of works, like so many works, and the entities already exist. Horace Walpole's already there. He's already there alongside all the other people that were also writing Gothic literature. We can see his influences. And the work that we mainly did was trying to connect one work to another work, or one entity to a work, or recognize that someone was inspired by somebody else, because we were trying to map. Like, I'm an anthropologist or ethnographer. I'm very fascinated with how things connect and why they connect. And as I work at an academic and theological library, I thought it might help to map and visualize and help with some of our lecturers' projects, but they just weren't old enough, whereas this one was. So let's get into works. So you'll find when you're working in Meridian, there's a lot of works. You can find the Castle of Otranto, you can find all the other editions. It's everything is there. And that was so much better for us, because we would spend a lot of time trying to connect an author to a work, or go, oh, this work's not even able to be harvested because it's not a book, it's an article. And a lot of our lecturers wrote articles or chapters, not books, or they're a lot slower. So the outputs are just not as much there. And so the enhancement of the description and make those relationships was just a lot more enjoyable, a lot easier. And we found, again, some entities would be missing. I tried to map a historic event which wasn't terribly well known, and I should have thought that it's not going to be there. But the great thing about the Gothic literature is you can see who did what, when. There's a timeline, and you might do a bit of tidying, but it's mostly already there. And the great thing about it is, as we were doing this project, Hugh created a visualization app to try to get a sense of how the OCLC ontology actually connected one thing to another. And so he's done some GPS and other works to kind of deal with the spaghetti of all the entities. So this is me just visualizing it through my Adobe Express, but Hugh's done some more mapping of this connection. So if you look at a person like Horace Walpole, who's just, the Gothic nerd of his time, and he built his own house, and he inspired other people to build their own houses, and they were happy when they fell down because they were ruined. Yay, we love ruins. But you see that he inspired not just Clara Reeve, who's probably not super well known, but her book, The Old English Baron, is basically a retelling of Castle of Otranto. He inspired Anne Radcliffe with her Mysteries of Udolpho, and she went on to have quite a successful career as a Gothic novelist. And then obviously Mary Shelley's extremely well known for not just being the daughter of a very well-known feminist activist, but she wrote Frankenstein, which is probably one of the most influential science fiction Gothic novels of all time, and has inspired so many more. And then, of course, we have Jane Austen, who's one of the greatest English novelists ever, I would have to say, and she made a direct reference to Mysteries of Udolpho in Northanger Abbey. So we have these things that make the connection. So what if you were a user and you're trying to find a book in the library and you just want to read Castle of Otranto? Wouldn't it be great if they also said, you might also like Frankenstein, you might also like Mysteries of Udolpho? So it's not that we're able to really make a project that changed the world, but it helped us to just explore the possibilities of linked data. So here's just a little bit more information. I found this really, really fun. It's interesting seeing that one house could inspire a whole genre of literature, and then when you reach peak genre, you get the parodies, which is obviously Jane Austen's parody of Northanger Abbey is really, really funny. It's not serious at all. So I'm going to finish up there, and I'm going to hand over to Hugh, who's going to show you how he used the an app to use the JSON format in Meridian's software and take some of the entities and works and relations that we worked on. And he also decided to go off down his own road and make some new discoveries of his own. So I hope you enjoyed a little ride through Gothic literature, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the presentation. Thanks for having us. Bye.
Okay, I'm going to go a little bit off the beaten track here and talk a little bit about paint, because in my other career, I'm a conservator, and I've been doing a project that identifies pigments. And along this journey where I was learning how to do this, we really came across this story of the really early invention of the pigment Prussian blue. And this is a real Gothic story in itself, because a German chemist, or maybe we could call him an alchemist, really inspired this pigment by contaminating some potash, selling it to another guy who mixed it with blood and produced blue. So what he was trying to do here was to create some red dye made from crushed up beetles. And that's the alizarin you see here. But actually what he got was Prussian blue because he bought contaminated potash. And these two guys got together and made the pigment, and it became the very first synthetic pigment. And that's, I think, important because this is the genesis of science fiction, making things out of other body parts. I mean, this pigment that I made here is actually a Frankenstein in itself. It's rabbit glue and blood, essentially, that makes that blue pigment. So what's all of this got to do with linked data? Well, when we started working with Meridian, it was very hard, I think, to visualize how all the relationships between these things work. So I thought, why not make a network graph? And over time, I used Python to create this app. And this is the basically the network graph that Amy was referring to here, of all the Gothic authors of this early period mapped together. Before I talk about anything else, let's trace our Prussian blue. So Dippel, this guy here, he was actually born in a place called Frankenstein Castle. And the story goes that Mary Shelley heard of this particular story, and Dippel was accused of robbing graves and all sorts of things, and this directly inspired Frankenstein. So I thought, okay, how easy is it to trace this around back to her using linked data? And it actually turns out to be a really short route in two directions. So it's very circular. If we start here at Frankenstein's castle, we can go to Dippel. We can go to a guy called Diesbach, who was the guy who had the contaminated potash. We can go through to a guy called Scheele. Scheele is quite interesting because he also created emerald green, or Scheele's green, the problematic arsenic pigment. Let me go through. He inspired a guy called Humphrey Davy, a British chemist, who corresponded with Shelley, Percy Shelley. And then we get directly to Mary Shelley. So that's actually quite a quick route. Did you hear that story that way? We can also go in the other direction. So Dippel to Swedenborg to William Blake, to the publisher, Joseph Johnson, who published the works of William Godwin, who was Mary Shelley's father. So that's a quick route in two directions. We've got influence from Frankenstein's castle going to Mary Shelley, traced through this visualization, which I thought was really fun and cool. But there's lots of other things we can do with our data here. I've preloaded it, and actually, if you want to have a play with the graph itself, I'll paste it into the chat and you can go and play. It's a static version you can play with. Otherwise, the real app requires a subscription to Meridian. But if you want to have a play with it, I'll place that link in the chat too. Which is here. Okay. So we've got our map, and that's great. But there's more connections we can make. So Amy talked about the things in our special collections, and here we can actually draw in some other linked data through our AAAF manifests from our digitizations. This is pretty cool. And what you really see here is figures dwarfed by the landscape, very Gothic type thing, a ruin. But also what's down here is these Gothic arches. Now that's really interesting because this other book that we've got here also shows that trope. So this is something I spent quite a lot of time working with, restoring. It's a beautiful, beautiful binding from 1858. But what we see here is the Gothic arch. So again, we have these two things connected visually, contextually through the data. My favorite thing though is the little flying hourglass with bat wings. A little bit crazy, very Gothic. This book is really interesting too because it's a very early synthetic dye that makes that color a very dark purple. Previous to this, really, purple didn't exist really until the invention of moving. So again, you see like this intersection of the chemistry, science, art is all like fermenting together in this period. Can we visualize dates? Yes. So really what you'd look for here would be clusters of dates, and they don't really with this. It's very diffuse. It's quite spread out. So what else can we do? I've pre-done it here, but I've enabled the community detection using the Louvain algorithm. So we're detecting quite a number of different communities of entities, essentially. We have our group with the authors, so Mary Shelley, William Godwin, Clara Reeve. We have the Walpole group, and you see that Walpole is a very highly connected entity. You have the Byron group here. You have the pigment group here. And you have the publishing and art group here. So Blake, the publisher, Joseph Johnson, Henry Fuseli. And lastly, the little group on their own. So that's Jane Austen and Anne Radcliffe and their works, which are kind of a little bit later and a little bit separate. You could probably think to this group. So that's why they're kind of sitting off and quite separate. So once we have the data, we can calculate some mathematical algorithms that give us some information. So here we can find how these things are connected. So who is the most central figure in the group? And according to the data, yes, it is Horace Walpole, but he's equal with Byron. If we have a look at the visualization again, we can see, yeah, Walpole just has a group. He's an octopus. He's got so many little connections coming out of him. If we look at betweenness, though, so Byron is sort of way down the list when you look at betweenness. Betweenness really identifies nodes that act as bridges or information brokers. So, yes, Walpole's influential because he has so many connections coming out of him. Same with Shelley. But Shelley has quite a different type of betweenness if we look at the graph. So Walpole just has things coming out of him, but Shelley is very bidirectional. So she's influential because she's exchanging data back and forth between different groups of people. So her husband, Byron, and so on, and her own family. So closeness is very interesting. Closeness really looks at nodes that are capable of rapid interaction. So very naturally here we have London. And if we look back in the visualization, yes, everyone's passing through London in this group. There's a huge number of directions coming out of that node. Now the eigenvector, I just like saying eigenvector, but it's quite interesting. It's sort of how cool you are by association. And quite naturally here, Walpole, with all his connections, basically becomes the coolest entity on the graph. And PageRank is very similar. Okay. So what else can we do? We can do some machine learning. And we're using two type of models here. One is better than the other, I would have to say. But Node2Vec does a kind of probabilistic similarity search. So we can pick and choose here who we want to. This is the recommendation engine that Amy was referring to. So if we go and find Jane Austen, what's it recommending here? Northanger Abbey? Yes, probably the prime Gothic novel or the only Gothic novel that Jane Austen wrote. So it's going to recommend it. Mysteries of Udolpho? Yes, Anne Radcliffe, and going down from there. These entities you see here came in actually from RDFS reasoning, which I applied. It's brought in basically a bunch of different entities that weren't part of the original graph. So actually we can look to see what this missing entity is and see if we can find its relevance. So I'm going to go over here to Meridian. Let's find out what this entity is. Thomas Bentley. Very interesting. So again, it's kind of that art connection. It's coming in. And quite often with these semantic models, it gives you these out-of-the-box things that you wouldn't normally think of. And it's really, really fascinating to me how they come in. But usually if you do some research, you can figure out just how semantically they're connected. So there's a lot of rich data with Meridian, and we spent a lot of time enriching it ourselves. So we can also use textual semantics. So that's the text sentences model. I'm hosting this at Hugging Face, which is the machine learning kind of repository. And they're hosting the text sentences model. So that's why it's sitting here. Let's try a semantic search with someone.
And Hugh, just to note, you have 3 minutes left in the session.
Okay, I'm going to wind up in a sec. Let's try Jane Austen. And recommending, yes, Clara Reeve, Mary Shelley, William Blake, interestingly, Percy Shelley. So things, yes, that do appear to be highly semantically related. I mean, it's not going to relate them to the pigment guys, for example, because they're just not semantically related. Since I'm at time, I'll stop here and not ramble on anymore and see if there's any questions.
There is one question and a lot of excitement. Everyone just loved how metal everything was and how cool and pretty. But the question that we had was, are there any recommendations for reading about community detection or learning more about how these centrality measures work?
Yes, so primarily it all comes from network theory, and they're really mathematical models. So community detection is something called Louvain. I can probably dig up some links for everyone and post them somewhere if that's possible.
That'd be great.
Cent
We can forward it over
yeah.
in the Slack for you.
Centrality is another mathematical model. I'm a bit hazy on what's going on there, but there's the different so betweenness, closeness, centrality, eigenvector, and so on are just mathematical models that run different types of formulas on what they want to show you. The interesting one is, I think, eigenvector is what Google adapted for use with their search engine. And the idea is that the coolness is connected by the number of links that go back to you, which is like what we saw with Walpole and Byron and so on. They're very highly connected by other people, which rises them up. That's how the eigenvector works. But yeah, I will definitely post some info somewhere if you provide me a space.
Definitely. I can get you either, we can post it on the Sched, we can post it in the Slack, we can get folks in the chat, whatever makes the most sense for you.
Okay, cool.
Wonderful. Thank you. So that was incredible. I think seeing those connections, that's exactly why I love linked data. So this was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us.
No worries. Thank you very much, everyone.